Welcome to Watching Trees Grow, a podcast by Troutwood. I'm Natali, co-founder and CEO of Troutwood. I started this company because I believe in the power of financial literacy, and I host this podcast because I believe that sharing knowledge is one of the best learning tools. In the podcast, we interview financial professionals from around the globe. We explore their lives, careers, and share their stories with you. It's an honor to introduce today's guest. Craig Slaughter joins us from West Virginia, where he is the CEO and Executive Director of the West Virginia Investment Management Board, a $24 billion fund. You heard that correctly, billion, managed on behalf of 130,000 beneficiaries. It's an honor to have Craig as a guest, and together he and I are going to break down his experiences into financial lessons that we as individuals can learn from. Craig, welcome.
It's good to be here.
And Craig, to immediately relate to our audience, my first question is who are those 130,000 beneficiaries?
Well, to be a little clearer, I think I probably need to correct that statement a little bit. We handle $24 billion, but it's for multiple investors, so to speak, multiple entities. The vast majority of our assets are managed, are defined benefit pension assets, which are managed on behalf of those beneficiaries you referred to, the 140,000 beneficiaries that consist, which are made up of, public employees of the state of West Virginia, teachers all across the state of West Virginia, judges, your local circuit judge, the Supreme Court judges, the policemen, the state policemen that you all see around the state, some municipal police and fire pension plans. So your city may invest with us. They don't have to, but they may. So it's a diverse group of state employees, I guess, or state or political subdivision employees of the state that we manage money for.
And Craig, we're filming this episode kind of uniquely and specifically for high school educators and students across West Virginia. When I hear you describe the beneficiaries, I'm thinking of that student audience and thinking, boy, that's moms, dads, neighbors, brothers, sisters. It's the teacher in front of the classroom. It's directly applicable and relatable to folks in their lives. Is that fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. I'm absolutely sure that probably everyone watching this knows somebody who is a beneficiary of the assets we manage.
Well, Craig, let's dive in. That 24 billion, big number, 130,000, a giant number. Before we talk finance, tell us a little bit about Craig, the non-finance side of Craig. And Craig, to set you up for this question, we went out to our community and said, we're having this conversation with Craig, hugely impressive background. And they said, well, tell us about the non-finance side of Craig.
Oh, goodness. I don't know where to start with that. I'm just a guy from West Virginia. I grew up in Cross Lanes, but went to high school at Nitro, West Virginia, which some of you all may be familiar with, a smaller size high school, and grew up in a good family, and was able to go to college at Cornell University, and then followed up with a degree in law at the West Virginia University, and then stumbled onto this job, I, being 60 plus years old, there's a lot to talk about, I suppose, and that conversation could go on forever.
Well, what if I help you steer it to your two favorite hobbies?
Well, I've had many hobbies over the years, but my two favorite hobbies now actually are climbing mountains. So I go out to Colorado or Wyoming or California pretty much every year and spend a week or two climbing mountains out there. And then my other hobby, which is a fairly recent occurrence, is I've gotten into woodworking a little bit. I just enjoy the enjoy wood, but also just to enjoy the problems it creates and trying to solve the problem that of trying to make something out of a piece of wood and all the different things you have to do. Interestingly, that started with some cherry logs I collected from my dad's property back 30 some years ago and kept for 30 plus years, and with the idea that I was going to make something out of them eventually, and ended up buying a chainsaw and learning how to cut boards out of them with a chainsaw and that sort of thing, and just gravitated from there. But then now one of my older hobbies was cycling. I used to cycle very seriously and used to even race a little bit, which Gene, we talked about that a little earlier. But that's fallen by the wayside as I've gotten older.
Well, and Craig, you had not mentioned the woodworking. So I learned woodworking from a past mentor of mine in Jamestown, New York, a Swedish gentleman. And at one point, Jamestown, New York was the woodworking capital of the country many, many, many years ago. And,
wow, I didn't know that.
It's an amazing hobby. When you said cherry, my first project was a cherry coffee table with use some Spalding maple to put some white legs. So we'll talk further off the show on that hobby.
Yeah, I'd like to see a picture of that.
Absolutely. So any student that just heard what rock climbing, Craig rock climbs, I rock climb. Where in West Virginia? I know you mentioned traveling out west, but what about when you stick local? Where do you climb?
Well, I should qualify that. I'm really not much of a rock climber. I've done some rock climbing in the New River Gorge but I'm not good enough to do it on my own. I need a guide to go with me. So when I talk about climbing out west, it's really more what I would call scrambling, where ropes and technical hardware aren't required. It's kind of so as you probably know, there's 50 plus 14,000 foot peaks in Colorado. And so a lot of people get a big, that's a big goal for them. I probably won't do that, but I started out going after the hardest one of those 50 some, hardest ones of those 50 some. And so I just look for interesting mountains. I just love being up high and scrambling around. Some of it's pretty scary, but I don't know. That's part of the charm of it, I guess.
Craig, I'm wondering if your board of trustees is encouraging you to take up checkers and chess as opposed to mountain climbing.
I have to admit that they're a little concerned, I should say, and constantly suggest that maybe I should cautioning me to be cautious and not stretch the boundaries too much.
So I'm going to ask you to kind of put yourself back in that high school classroom for this question, and then fast forward where you are now. What do you do in the day job, Craig, versus what people think you do, or what you might have thought someone in your position was doing prior to your entering it?
I think most people would assume that as the head, and I'm also the chief investment officer, I guess that's a third title I carry, but of this investment management board, that we're constantly buying and selling stocks, and know a huge amount about a lot of different companies, and oftentimes I get people that ask me for advice about a particular company. The reality is I don't do that. I don't look at individual companies as part of my daily job. Our job is to oversee an investment process, and it's more along the lines of I guess the best way to describe us is we're a mutual fund company of sorts, in the public sector. So we have a bunch of portfolios that we manage, and we contract out with expert money managers, the best money managers in the world, frankly, and to manage segments of the portfolio. So our job is really more of an oversight, bigger picture oversight of the investment process and people we hire to do the job for us. Now, for me in particular, my job is primarily management of people more than anything, because any organization with a fair number of people, we have 27 people on our staff. That's enough. I mean, you got to, somebody at the top has to manage the people and make sure things are getting done. Those people do all the work. I kind of just oversee and make sure it's all getting done. And I think a lot of people just don't understand that that's the way things actually work.
Did you always know that you wanted to be in finance and be in this position, or was there a turning point in your career that pivoted you this direction?
I did not know. I basically stumbled onto this, and maybe to put it, I think the way I started out when I was really young, post college, is, quite frankly, I realized I was a generalist. I didn't really have. I wasn't really someone who liked to, focus on any particular thing. And so I started out with this kind of ill-defined plan to work myself into a position where I was in charge of my day-to-day life. You can call it being the boss, so to speak. But also but also had a desire to do something for the betterment of society. Rather than just make money for myself. And, if you're just purely in business, I mean, kind of the number one goal is to make money in general. And there's kind of a tendency to just focus on that aspect of life. I always kind of had a sense that I wanted to do something more than that to help society. So that was my that was my general goal when I was, say, by 22, 23. I kind of developed that idea. That's the direction I wanted to go. And obviously that's a very broad direction. So, I mean, I thought, well, okay, the first step, maybe the first easiest way to move in that direction is to go to law school. And that's why I went to law school. I didn't really go to law school to be a lawyer per se, but the little bit of research I'd done indicated to me that a lot of people in a lot of important jobs in life, in a variety of different jobs in life, had been lawyers at one time. So I thought, well, that's a good place to start. And, if nothing else, you can always hang out your shingle and work for yourself as a lawyer, and do good for society. But I wasn't necessarily saying I want to be a lawyer. I just thought it was a good path to get me to where I wanted to go. And it worked out. I got out of law school, worked for a local law firm, Jackson & Kelly. And because of that job at Jackson & Kelly, I stumbled onto the opportunity to be the chief of staff of the treasurer's office when one of our clients was appointed to fill the interim position of treasurer as a result of a financial fiasco that caused the previous treasurer to resign. So, that kind of got me into that. I was brought in as chief of staff to help clean up the mess. And that led me to, kind of educated me a little bit on the investment process and this universe. And I realized that investing is, in some respects, it's the perfect place for a generalist, because everything that happens in the world has an impact on the investment process in some way, and may have a bearing on how you go about the job. And so it sort of fit what I was looking for originally, and so I saw the opportunity to make it into something that would satisfy that general goal, and kind of in a sense, the rest is history, I suppose.
Craig, you said something that my high school and college self resonated with. I stumbled on it.
Yep.
And I say that both from a personal, that pressure you feel when you're younger to give the impression you know what's next, or you know what you want to study in college, or what your job. I think that is just a magical statement. But then you follow it up by saying, I wanted to do something that helped society. You are doing that. I sense in this early part of our conversation that you are a very modest gentleman, but those 130 to 140,000 beneficiaries, your role, you are providing retirement and financial security for a giant subset of the West Virginia population. That absolutely helps society.
Well, I like to think so. our job here is, importantly, I think people should understand that, the Investment Management Board is by statute a fiduciary, which means we have it's one of the highest duties in law to be a fiduciary, and it basically means we have to we have a duty to manage the assets entrusted to us in the best interest of the beneficiaries. So, it doesn't matter what I want or what my goals are. What matters to me as a fiduciary and as a job, you have to divorce yourself from yourself, so to speak, when you think about these assets, and you have to think about what's in the best interest of those 130 plus thousand beneficiaries who are relying on us to invest their assets effectively. Now you're right. I mean, I like to remind myself that we have a role in this process. We're not the only person that has a role in this process. There is the state is responsible for providing the funds that we invest, or a large bit of the funds. The beneficiaries also provide us a portion of their salary, which goes into the pot and that we're managing. But once it goes into the pot, it's the beneficiary's money, and that may be an important point that when we talk later about some other things that you need to remember. For defined benefit pension plans, once the money goes into the pot and it is invested by us, it's the beneficiary's money. It's no one else's money, and it's only for their use.
Educators, students listening, I'm going to throw 2 suggested homework assignments based on Craig's last comments. One, understand what a legal fiduciary is. That is a big deal, and Craig beautifully described it. And then second, understand that last comment, that money, that $24 billion, it's not Craig's money. It's not the state's, it's the beneficiary's money. Those are very powerful statements, Craig. Craig, we're going to dive in deeper, and that's going to be the second part of the podcast. But one final question before diving into part 2 of this. What job were you working in high school and college?
High school it's like most people back in my time. I don't know what it's like now, but I did a bunch of things. Mowed grass, worked as a lifeguard, worked as a laborer on a construction crew. That was the worst job. Being a lifeguard was the best job. In college, I did more of the same stuff. So that's basically what you do. You just you get a job and you make money. And in fact, in college I worked 2 jobs in the summers. I worked as a lifeguard and a laborer. So I'd go to 7 o'clock in the morning. I was on the job site working as a laborer all day long till about 3 o'clock, and then I'd get on my bicycle and ride to the pool and work as a lifeguard till 9:30 at night, and then go home, go to bed. And didn't do that every single day, but a lot of the days of the week. So working is important.
100%. So, Craig, now I'm going to speak directly to that student audience, the students who are mowing a lawn this summer, who are lifeguarding, who are working construction. What an example of what's possible, right? What an example of what's possible. Super cool, Craig. Thank you for that. I'm going to segue us to part 2, where we dive into more of that, the day-to-day management of the fund, your responsibilities, and try to bridge that to the concept of this generation of students needing to take responsibility for their financial future. And I'm going to start with, you said a very important comment when I had asked about the perception of what people think you do versus what you do. And you'd mentioned the perception of constantly buying and selling stocks, but that you do not look at individual companies. I speculate that our student audience probably said, whoa, because individuals generally only look at individual companies and generally only look at highly speculative individual companies. For students that maybe heard that term mutual fund for the first time in their lives, or who kind of said, wait a minute, he's not buying GameStop? I'm out of here. Can you back into that philosophy of why you aren't spending your days buying individual stocks and what more the approach is? Because if it doesn't say crypto or GameStop, as a young person reading it right now.
Right. Boy, that's a long discussion. I'd start with the first thought for small investors is one thing you got to remember about the markets is, well, first of all, for us, we're in it for the long term. We're not trying to make, we know we have to invest these assets indefinitely. And so we have to, we can't just think, okay, we're going to make this money now and walk away and go do something else with it. We're going to be in the markets constantly. Now, another point I want to make just about markets in general, it's really important for everybody to understand, I think, is that there are hundreds of thousands, millions of people out there who are very, very smart people. And some of the smartest people in the world are investing money. And they also do this all day long. They think about it. They're working at that job all day long, and most of their waking hours. And so that's the universe. There's a large number of people in the market that fit that category. Now, if you're just a casual investor who has a day job totally unrelated to investing, and you're going to try to and you're trying to compete with those people on the side, that sounds like a losing proposition to me. Because to think that you are smarter than those people, you would have to be a lot smarter than those people to be able to gain an advantage over them if you're not spending all of your day doing it. So in a sense, you either have to be a whole lot smarter than everybody else or outwork everybody else. And then you fall back again on what I said earlier. There are probably over 1 million people, if not more. Just a huge number of people out there that are actually doing this every day, all day long. So just remember that you're competing with them in this universe. So I think that's where modesty has to come in. I mean, you have to be realistic about who you are and what your capabilities are. And I just know that I'm not that much smarter than anybody else, and especially not, the best investors out there. I just don't think I am, and I doubt if most of the listeners here are either. And so. And then to think that you're going to be able to gain it, to win in the long run in that game, seems like the height of insanity, to be honest with you. You may win in the short run. It's like gambling. You can win in the short run, but in the long run, the house always wins. And so you almost have to look at it that way. Because in a sense, you're buying and selling stocks. There's a cost to that. There's always a cost, a transaction cost, or if you buy a mutual fund, you're paying a mutual fund provider a fee to do that for you. So that fee comes out of your return, and those transaction costs come out of your return. Investing and trading frequently, you got trading costs and so forth. You got to subtract that from your earnings. And you may win initially, but then the stock market drops and the value of your assets falls. You're losing money. If you do this long enough, your odds get lower and lower.
Craig, you started by saying we are in it for the long term. Can I ask how many years do you define as long term? A long term investment?
Well, for pension plans, they're set up to exist to infinity, I should say. I mean, they don't have an end life. As a practical matter, we think in terms of 10 to 30 years down the road. So when we look at assets, we tend to think of what's the likely return over the next 10 to 30 years of this particular asset. When I say an asset, I mean an asset could be as broad as stocks, all the stocks in the market at this point, or all the bonds in the market at this point, or all the real estate. So you look at that whole universe and say, what's the the rate of return on that universe? What do we expect that rate of return to be over 10 to 30 years out into the future?
So 10 to 30, if I'm an 18-year-old high school senior sitting in a West Virginia classroom, that puts me in the 28 to 48 range.
Right.
That's really interesting. That means that I, as an individual, can learn off of what you are doing and apply a similar long-term approach. Would you agree with that? Is that a fair statement?
Oh, absolutely. I think as 18-year-olds have they have long time horizons. I mean, I think most of you would assume you're going to live forever. I did when I was 18 years old. I didn't think about the end game. But regardless, even if you do, you're in all likelihood you're gonna live to be in your 70s at least. And as you get older, your chances of living longer than the mid 70s or so forth goes up. So maybe if you're healthy at the time you retire, then you're in all likelihood going to live well into your 80s. So that's still, if you're retired at 65 and you're going to live till you be 85 or 90, that's 20, 25 years down the road. That's still a long time. So I think that's the framework in which people ought to really think as a rule.
And money is important for those 25 years, those past working years. Craig, for any student that said, boy, yeah, but I'm different. I can beat the market. I can trade, or I've got the secret ingredients here. Boy, Craig, this is a boring approach he's talking about. What's not boring is making money. And I'm curious, Craig, what the growth, you mentioned $24 billion. What was it when you started?
Oh, gosh. Probably, I think if I just ballparking, I'm thinking around $5 billion.
So I would say to that student audience, that's 5 billion to 24 billion is the exact opposite of boring, and learn from the discipline that the state has in place. Craig, our next handful of questions, we went out to our community and said, what questions would you want to ask someone in Craig's position? These are fun, and they correlate with our conversation. So just know these are coming not from me, but from students who are interested in learning from you. This first one, what is the most important thing you do at your job? That's not an easy question, Craig.
No, it's not. It's like most things. Everything is it's the more you dig into it, the more complex it becomes. The most important thing I do at my job, overall, is make sure that the whole organization is working in the best interests of the beneficiaries of the assets we manage. It sounds boring to keep saying that, and it becomes tedious, but that is the job. And now that means a lot of different things. I mean, it's important that I treat my that the employees in our office are treated well and are compensated adequately for the job they do. It's important that we have good people in those jobs. It's important that we have a good work environment, because all those things go into doing a good job for the beneficiaries. It's important that we watch the money managers who are making the buy and sell decisions on particular stocks or bonds or other assets. Our job is to make sure that they are actually doing what we hired them to do, and doing and playing in the right ballpark, for example, and not buying stocks that they're not supposed to be buying, or classes of stocks they're not supposed to be buying, and all those sort of things. So,
Craig, I love that the first part of your answer immediately you said the word beneficiaries again, because every time you say that word, I think that the teachers I know so well across the state, I think the moms and the dads working so hard across West Virginia. So I'm definitely noticing how often you're saying that word. So Craig, don't fault me for this next question either. I'm smiling in advance of it because I love that a student asked it. Craig, are you happy? And I'd love to ask the student what the context behind the question, but are you happy? And then I'll tease you with the second part of the question, or do you still want to be something else like an astronaut, or maybe in your case, a mountain climber climbing Everest? That's an interesting question from a young person.
Yeah, it is. I'm happy. Now it's for a number of reasons. One is I think my I have a good balance of work and life, as opposed to work life. My other life outside of work. I've always tried to. It's always been important to me to balance those well, and so. My job is I really do like my job because it's all the things I really wanted. Again, like I said earlier, I'm a generalist. I get to think about everything. I get to I get to travel around the world, talking to some of the smartest people in the world, and sometimes what they say is completely over my head, but I oftentimes get some nuggets of information out of it. I get to work with great people. I have this, and I'm doing something I feel good about. My work life is something that makes me feel good about what I do. Because you're right. I mean, teachers. I get people that I know that are public employees or teachers. They're grateful because some of them remember what was happening back in the 80s, and there was this investment fiasco that got me in this originally, and they lost a ton of money, and some of that money was teachers' money, public employees' money, and people are they're all cognizant of the fact that if it's not managed well, then their retirement is at risk, and so that it's nice to be it feels good to be able to do something positive for people, for other people. But the other element to it is I've been married to the same woman, only one woman my entire life, and have a good family, and great family, and I enjoy that. And that's another critical element to happiness, in my opinion. It's you can't just be happy at work. You got to be happy all the way around. You need to. They're both equally important.
100% the work-life balance. Craig, to that, it's going to be the wave of personal finances is, I think, coming into the classroom. The work that West Virginia is doing with Finance University being just one example. It's going to be, I speculate that it's probably going to be a really good thing as these educators and students become more aware of what it means to be a long-term investor, as opposed to just, hoping that money's going to be there. They're going to understand that it will be there because they'll understand the process better than maybe they did 20 years ago. That's just personal opinion. But as you said that, maybe an interesting direction the conversation goes in the future. Craig, now we're going to kind of time portal this, and we're going to go 3 questions: high school, college, first job. And think again to our audience here. But if you could change one thing about your time in high school, what would it be? And the examples that this student threw out: would you apply to a different college? Would you have saved more summer job money, etc.? These aren't the usual questions you get in a day, Craig.
Boy, one thing I decided early on was to never regret anything I did, because it doesn't do any good. You take what you did and make the best of it. And if there's a lesson to be learned, you learn it. If it was a great experience, there's probably another lesson to be learned from that as well. In high school, I was an introvert in high school. I didn't really, if I would do anything over again, I would probably be a little more adventurous, and try to be more outgoing and so forth. So, that's really it. I mean, otherwise, uh, I suppose the only other thing I can think of off the top of my head is I would have gone out for the basketball team uh, as a sophomore in high school rather than as a senior. I just didn't do it because I wasn't sure of myself, and I guess I didn't have as much confidence in myself as I should have. But
Those are great, Craig. Well, to that sophomore thinking of trying out for the basketball team, go do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Just do things. Don't be afraid.
I love that. I was an introvert too in high school, and I was always afraid to ask questions. So I'll throw that to that student audience as well. Don't be afraid to ask questions. We know it takes courage to do so.
Yeah, I would echo that. Absolutely. Yeah.
So fast forwarding to college, if you could change one thing about college.
I probably should have played on the rugby team instead of the lacrosse team. Because I was better suited for that.
Craig, I love the realness because we work in an industry when we poll students, they think finance and that they check out. I love the way you answer both of those questions.
Yeah. Now there is another thing. From an academic standpoint, I wish I'd taken more courses in economics. To be honest, I only took one course, Eco 101, macro, and at the time I didn't really. Quite honestly, though, I didn't appreciate economics at the time, and I do much more now. I think it's a much more interesting topic than I did at the time because I now know that a lot of what happens in the world is the subject of economics, both on a macro level and a micro level. The Federal Reserve has a huge influence on what happens in the world in the economic or the financial world, and understanding how the macroeconomics that the Federal Reserve is working with would have been. It's something I've learned since, but it's a fascinating subject. But at the time, I really didn't. I didn't perceive myself as a financial kind of person, so I majored in history, which I don't regret either. I love the fact that I majored in history. I still enjoy history, and it's just one of those things in my background that I think has made me a better person in some ways.
Mm-hmm. Now, fast forwarding from that history major, what's something you would have done differently at first job? And then there's a specific follow-up question to this, Craig. Should I be saving in a 401k? So this is a student who, a graduate who I think had a motive with this question.
Yeah, again, first job. Well, my first job out of college was painting a house, but so I'm not going to go there. My first serious job, I would say, was after I went to law school and as a lawyer. And in retrospect, I think I probably should have. I should have. I could have chosen a different path, which I might have enjoyed just as much. And maybe I went to work for a big law firm. One of the biggest law firms in the state at the time. It was very much a defense-oriented. A corporate law firm, and I don't know that kind of practice really suited me, which is part of the reason I did leave and took the opportunity that was offered to me to go to the treasurer's office. So, but on the other hand, if I hadn't been there, the opportunity that I got wouldn't have existed either. So there's no way I can regret that, at least at this point in my life. But I will say one thing about that gets to this 401k, or maybe even a corollary to the 401k issue, is the one thing I think I should have done earlier in my life that I didn't is save my money, save more money. And it wasn't, and in looking back, it's not so much to save it for. I mean, your 401k, you need to put money aside for your 401k because you're going to have to live on that at one point. And the sooner you do it, the better off you are. But I would have saved more money in addition to a 401k because what that does is it gives you options in your life and just kind of give you an example. After the great financial crisis, in 2008, housing prices were just fell through the floor. Everything was super cheap. And I bought a condo, and my wife and I bought a condo at the beach, and we got a great deal on it. It was, significantly less than it would have been in normal times, and it was no question it was a great deal. And it's gone up in value, and it's a whole lot more valuable than it was then. I should have bought 10 condos, but I didn't have the assets to buy more. And that's what saving your money gives you. It gives you the option to do something that can actually be leveraged into something greater later on. So buying a house or a condo is a simple example, but it can be the leverage that allows you to go back to school if you decide that your life path is the wrong path. You need to change paths. It gives you the ability to start your own business. Maybe if you worked 5 or 6 years or 10 years and you see a something that you just know it's a great business. If you don't have some capital, you're not going to be able to do it. Or adequate capital, you're not going to be able to do it. So again, it's about having options. So save your money to create options for yourself.
So important. Buy low, sell high is only possible if you have the money to buy low when the opportunity presents. Craig, just kind of continuing this progression and one final in this theme, now in your current seat. And I think this is good advice for the younger generation where COVID was their first, tough market experience. How do you invest through bad times, like a COVID, like a financial crisis? What's the process or the philosophy that you use?
I can put it in this. There's one of my dear friends, a peer of mine. He likes to say that. He goes like this. Sometimes he said, occasionally I have this brilliant idea, and the first thing I do is put myself in a dark room, lock the door, and wait for it to go away. And what he's really referring to is you in investing, you make a plan. You make a plan when things are normal for how you want to invest assets, and it's a long-term plan. And you're going to run into these markets like COVID, the pandemic, like the great financial crisis in 2008, like the dot-com bust in 99, 2000. Those kind of things are going to happen, and the markets are going to tumble. But your plan is in place, and the most important thing to do when that happens is nothing. Don't do anything. Just stick with what you got. Now, if you have some extra assets, extra cash on hand, that's a brilliant time to go buy something when the market tumbles, because in the long run, excuse me, history tells us that assets recover. Now it may be a fairly long time for that. It may take a long time for that to happen. I mean, in terms of years. That's why when we think about investing and develop a plan, it may be we think in 10, 20-year timeframes, because it may take time, but it in all likelihood, it will recover.
Well, and if I could make a bold-faced statement to our student audience, students, you too are long-term investors. You have that word Craig just said, you have time to apply that same philosophy. Craig, my final question, and this has just been a pure pleasure, and it's a curiosity question. Where does your thirst for knowledge come from? Because it exudes in just the way you presented, the way you've been answering these questions. Did you always have it?
Yeah, I guess I was just kind of born that way. I don't know. I was lucky to have great parents. They were interested in things. They were both read a lot, especially my mother. And she was, so I guess I've just always been interested in why things were the way they were. And I was taught to think that way, to ask questions and not accept anything at face value. And I just enjoy knowing why things work the way they work. I just think it's interesting. So,
were you an avid reader also then, back in high school, back in college?
Yeah, I was. In fact, at grade school, I can remember back in grade school, I was, I tried to get my work done as fast as I could so I could pull out my book and read. And so and I was able to do that. So other people would, you're sitting there in class, everybody's working through these problems. I did them, and I'd be reading my book. If it was just 15 minutes, I would do it.
I love that. Greg, one of my favorite books from my college years was October Sky with Homer Hickam. And obviously some strong ties to West Virginia there. That was a book that as I would share with friends in the dorm, they would devour. Craig, thank you. This was so much fun. I am so excited to share this with the educators in the classrooms across West Virginia, and I cannot be more sincere in expressing my appreciation.
Well, Gene, thank you for putting this on. I've really enjoyed it, and I hope I've been what I've said is of some benefit to the audience. And so, again, thank you.
No doubt. And thank you to everyone tuning in.